Hi everybody, and welcome back to another video on electronic science. So today we're going to be creating something called a half-wave rectifier. Basically, we're going to take the AC coming out of the outlet and turn it into about 170 volts of DC. So stay tuned for a video on electronic science. Hi everybody, and welcome back to another video on electronic science. So today, as you may notice, we are in a completely different location. That is because I built a new lab. Yes, I have been looking for a bigger space for a while now, so I'm in a different part of the basement now. As you can probably tell in the background, we got some woodworking things over there. And over here is the lab, so I hope you guys like it, and I hope you guys enjoy. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what is a half-wave rectifier? So basically, the power that comes out of your outlet, at least in the US, is a sine wave. Now, any alternating current is a sine wave, and it kind of looks like this. And on the top is the positive peak, and on the bottom are the negative peaks. And we kind of have a line over here, and that's kind of where the zero is, so no voltage. And this happens 60 times a second in the US and about 50 times a second elsewhere. So we're just going to say 60 hertz. Now, DC is just a straight line with basically 0 hertz. So this is DC, and this is AC. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking this right here, the 60 hertz, out of the power outlet, and we're going to be putting it into a diode. And the diode basically stops current from going one way, but lets it go the other way. So in this case, the diode is going to be letting out the positive bump of the sine wave and leaving this negative peak over here out. And then what we're going to do is put a capacitor in, and we're going to put a high voltage capacitor in. It's going to be about a 365 volt capacitor, and that's going to hold the sine wave close to the output peak as DC. And obviously, since DC, it's not AC, so it'll be a little bit of a higher voltage, around 165 volts, because we are using half-wave rectifier, not a full-bridge rectifier. So in this instance, we will have a little bit of voltage drop, especially with the high-voltage diode that we're using. Diodes do have a voltage drop on them. But depending on how many volts comes out of your outlet, you'll get somewhere around 170 volts of DC. So let's get started with building this project. So the materials for this project are pretty simple. So first, you're going to need a diode. Now, you're going to need to pick a properly rated diode that's able to handle at least 120 volts. This is a high-voltage diode that I salvaged out of a microwave capacitor, and this is meant for about 2,000 volts or more, so this should be pretty adequate for our project. Then you're going to need a high-voltage capacitor. Now, I suggest getting one of those out of a camera flash of a disposable camera. These are meant to be charged up to about 365 volts, and we're only going to be charging them to max 170 volts. This is going to be perfect. I happen to have 2 of them, so you're going to see what we're going to do with 2 of them later on. And last but not least, you're going to need a frayed extension cord with live and neutral at the very least. You don't really need the ground. We're not going to be using it in today's video. But make sure, since we are dealing with AC and frayed wires, that you do the necessary safety precautions and don't electrocute yourself, because that will be very painful at 120 volts of AC. But DC, on the other hand, well, you could touch it and you won't die. You'll just feel a tingle on your fingers, but more about that later. Also, since we are using capacitors, it's a good idea to put on your safety glasses, because we're going to need to discharge these capacitors, and they do make some pretty big sparks, especially when they're charged up with a lot of current. So, yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Alright everyone, so building this project is pretty simple. So first what you're going to need is your high voltage diode. Now, for some of those of you who do not have a high voltage diode, I find that these NU 4007 diodes work okay. They will rectify the AC, but they cannot handle nearly as much current as this big high voltage diode can. So definitely keep that in mind. We are going to be running, like, incandescent lights and things like that. But this thing probably can't really run much more than an incandescent light without heating up and burning. So first what you're going to do is take your high voltage diode and take the live side, or the hot side, of your extension cord, which is the black wire, and you're going to tie it onto the diode. Side is finished, it'll look a little something like this. Now we can push that aside. Now for the neutral side, we don't even have to rectify it, because neutral is neutral. And basically the power really isn't going to be going back into the neutral like it normally would, because it's going to be DC. So all we're going to need is an alligator clip for the neutral side. Now I'm going to be using this green alligator clip just so that I know that neutral is the negative side, because these are electrolytic capacitors, and as we know, if we don't connect the right polarity to an electrolytic capacitor, we will have an fiery explosion on our hands. So the live actually goes to the positive side of the capacitor, and the neutral goes to the negative side of the capacitor, just for the record. So we're going to do that right here. Now, what we're going to need now is another alligator clip, and I'm going to connect it to the other side of the diode. Now, for the record, just to let everybody know, the side in which you're going to want to connect the diode, because the diode has the little notch on it. So let me untie this. There we are. See this diode? It's not really visible, but see this little circle on it? You're going to want this to be facing out. So you're going to want to connect the side without the circle to the extension cord, the live part of your extension cord, and this part is just going to be facing out. This is where we're going to connect your alligator clips to put on to the capacitor. Once you have all that all set, you're going to have your new hot and neutral on your alligator clips. Now, these technically aren't hot and neutral anymore. They're technically now positive and negative because it's not a proper sine wave. So what you're going to do is take the positive, or the one with the diode connected to the live, and you're going to connect it to the positive side of your high voltage capacitor. And the neutral, you're going to connect to the negative side of your capacitor. Now, if we were to plug this in right now, we would get DC, but the capacitor would only charge up with DC, and it wouldn't be able to power much of a load. So that's why I left these capacitors, the one that I'm going to be using for the rectification, with very long wires sticking out of the top. This is so that we can put the live wires on the bottom and then get out two other alligator clips and put them on the very top of these wires so that they don't touch and send out half rectified AC into your circuit. This way we're going to get pure DC on the output. And just like that, we have now created a half-wave rectifier. So it first starts off over here where we have the 120 volts going into a high voltage diode. That's going to output the positive bump of the sine wave, and that's going to go into this capacitor. This capacitor is going to hold that positive bump at the very top, or just close to the top, as about 170 volts of DC. And then these are our output clips. So now we can connect a bunch of stuff up to it and power it off of DC. So first we're going to be starting off with is this incandescent light bulb. This one right here. This one is like a little 8-watt incandescent bulb that you usually put in like a chandelier light or something like that. Now, typically, this would be ran off of AC. So first we're going to do is plug this into the power outlet using normal AC, and then we're going to plug it into our half-wave rectifier and see what happens when it's on DC. So as you can see here, we have our light connected to this white wire going into the regular power bar of our system. So if we turn on the power here, we see that the light turns on normally, and take note of the brightness. This is usually the brightness that you would see on this light bulb ran off of a normal 120 volt AC circuit. Now, technically, 170 volts is a higher voltage than 120 volts, so this light bulb will be brighter, and not only will it be brighter, but technically, this light bulb is flickering, because as I said earlier, the sine wave means that the power turns on and off rapidly. But it's too fast, and the human eye cannot see that. But if you had a slow-mo camera, you could definitely shine it up to a light, and you'd actually be able to see it flash on and off as the sine wave went by into the light bulb. But anyways, let's hook it up to our half-wave rectifier. Now, for the record, regular incandescent light bulbs and a lot of type of light bulbs don't really care what polarity they're ran on. So it doesn't really matter which side you connect the light bulb. We're just going to connect it up willy-nilly to our half-wave rectifier with these alligator clips here. Alright, everything's connected up. We have the extension cord plugged into the regular 120 volts AC. Let's hope nothing goes wrong. And as we can see, the light is turning on, and I'm sure you can notice that it is a little bit brighter. Now, to show you guys that it is DC indeed coming out of this, I'm going to hook this half-wave rectifier up to my multimeter over there. To show you guys that there is DC coming out of this, we have our multimeter on, and as you can see, we have it on the DC setting. So let's connect it up. So first, we're going to put the multimeter down, and we're going to put it up on its stand, so you guys are able to see the reading. Okay, let me angle it this way. Perfect. Now, what we're going to do is connect it up just to these alligator clips. And we're going to turn on the power, and we're going to see what the voltage is coming out of it. And as you can see, we're getting about 3.2 volts out of it right now without the power on. That's because the capacitor still has a little bit of charge left in it. Now, if we turn on the power, we can see the capacitor is charging. Right now, we're at about 162 volts and rising. That's because once this capacitor gets up to about 160 volts, it slowly but surely charges. And if we switch the meter over into the AC setting, we can see there is 0 AC in here. So we've completely rectified all the AC out of this. Back over to DC here, we can see now we're up to about 163 volts. This is usually what I'm getting out of my half-wave rectifier. Now, different capacitors and different diodes will vary different results. But as you can see, when we kill the power, we still have 162 volts. It is slowly dropping because there is technically a small load connected to it, and that's my multimeter. So watch this. This is where you're going to need your safety goggles in case sparks go flying. And as you can see, if your load didn't completely discharge your capacitor, you can have a little bit of fun and discharge it yourself. Nothing too impressive, but it is a little bit of spark, and that's about 160-ish volts that you saw getting shorted out and dropping the capacitor down to 0. Now, there are many videos online that you may see that, oh, DC doesn't hurt as much as AC. Now, if I were to touch the 120 volts of AC under the right circumstances, I could actually die. And so we're definitely not going to be testing the pain of 120 volts of AC. But for science, we're going to be testing the pain of 170 volts of DC. So I have my bare alligator clips here, and I'm going to turn on the power. And obviously, we have about 160-ish volts coming out of here. We can actually test it out with the multimeter, just so that you guys know what I'm touching here. We turn it on, try to angle it towards you guys here, and I'll connect them up just for old time's sake. We can see the meter immediately rises to about 163 volts, like we saw earlier. So I'm going to get rid of these right here, and I'm going to touch them just with my 2 fingers so the current is actually going to go through my heart across my body. Now, I feel a little bit of tingle in my fingertips. Now, a lot of times it catches you by surprise, because the way I describe the pain is like a static electricity shock when you touch something metal or, something, like anything really where you're going to discharge. So if I were to go a little bit further down on my fingers, I don't feel it as much. As you can see, my fingers actually shake a little bit. And that's because the electric current running through my fingers is actually messing with my nerves and causing my muscles to tense up, which is not healthy. But, you can touch it, on your body, and it won't be as painful as 120 volts of AC. Now, I could even take a lamp and hold the contacts to the lamp and have it turn on. Let's try that. I now have a 40-watt incandescent bulb, and we're going to be connecting this up to the half-wave rectifier. We could see... Ow! Oh, jeez! Well, that didn't go as planned. So apparently, I was grounded. Here, I'll show you guys basically what I was doing. Standing over here on an extension cord and on a grounded floor. And 40 watts is like 30 milliamps, I would say, 35 milliamps. And that went through this hand. I felt it in this hand to ground. So, yeah, don't do that unless you're isolated. And unless I stand under that chair, I'm not isolated. So let's not do that. Alright, we're going to try this again. Now with the lamp, I'm not going to be touching it. I'm actually going to use my multimeter here as a support. Now you will see a little bit of a spark come out of this. Why isn't it turning on? Well, I don't know if I caused it, but this lamp, I don't know if you could hear that, but the filament is blown. This is an incandescent bulb. Alright, we're going to take 2 on powering an incandescent lamp. This time we're going to be doing a 60-watt incandescent lamp, which is about a half an amp, so this is even more dangerous. So let's give it a shot. I'm not going to hold it because I can't isolate myself from ground well enough here. And as you can see, that's a little bit brighter than a 60-watt lamp on 120 volts of regular AC. And it also puts out a lot of heat. So, yeah. In conclusion today, be careful because 170 volts can hurt you. It's not as bad. Like, I could touch this, and that was not nearly the pain as I felt when I was holding it to the contacts of that lamp. So definitely just, play safe with this. This is, after all, electricity. It is high voltage. So wear protective gloves, protective gear, and safety goggles. for the awesome sparks at the end of the show. Let's see what else we could do with this. Now, remember how I mentioned a second capacitor earlier? Well, here's the second capacitor. This is another capacitor that I salvaged out of an old disposable camera, and it's rated at 330 volts. So what we're going to be doing is connecting it up to our half-wave rectifier here, and this will charge up like the other capacitor, only with the proper half-wave rectification. Now, before you do this is an electrolytic capacitor, I just realized now, actually. You need to connect it minding its polarity. So, the one coming off of the diode is going into here, which is this yellow one. So that's where the positive voltage is. And negative is going to be this red one. And as you can see, the red one is connected. Okay, yeah, that should work. And if we turn this on, charges up right away, and you can turn off the power. Now you have a fully charged 170 volt capacitor that you can go around and shock people with it. It kind of hurts. I mean, yeah, that hurts. So, yeah, and you can also trick your friends by saying, oh yeah, put up a screwdriver and put it against these contacts. Although I did just charge it a lot, touching it to my body. But if you charge it up right away, it will make a big spark. So yeah, I guess you could do that with another high voltage capacitor if you happen to have one. Alright everybody, that's going to about wrap it up here on electronic science. So I hope you guys learned something new today. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and also subscribe to the channel if you like our content. Also, leave a comment down below if you like this video, have any good video ideas in the future, or have any questions about the project that we did here today. But I'll about wrap it up here on electronic science. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you guys next time. Bye everyone.